My mom and sister rewrote my dad's dead will behind my back and tried to hide it from me, until I found evidence that my dad provided from beyond the grave. I still remember how I felt when I got the text from my sister. I sat there completely nauseated, rereading it almost 100 times. Hey, there's limited seats at Dad's will reading. Thanks for understanding. You're the best. But I was not understanding. I wasn't his half-cousin, nor was I his in-law. I was his son, the only person to take care of him in his final years. And my sister, the same sister who I called to help me take care of Dad, the same one who never did, had just cut me out. My eyes danced across the screen for any clue that it was some sort of psychological prank. But as the minutes went by and the clock ticked, my blood ran cold. I felt the color drain out of my face. But grief makes you do stupid things, and that's why I made the worst decision possible, to call my mom. At first, it went straight to voicemail, almost like she had hung up straight away. But luckily, after 4 more calls, she finally picked up. Her tone was joyful, excited even. "Hey, how's my chicken doing?" I took a deep breath, knowing I was about to ruin her mood. "I just got the news from Vanessa. She says I'm prohibited from being on the guest list because of lack of seating." This was followed by such a long silence that I almost thought she hung up or something. "Your father's death has been hard enough on me. Can you please leave your petty drama out of this?" Petty drama. My heart was beating in my stomach with anger. I tried to play it cool, but it didn't really work. "Are you serious?" I asked, voice shaking. "Mom, I'm his son. Why am I being excluded from my own father's will reading?" I heard a very audible sigh, followed by what sounded like her hand smacking her forehead. "Honey, limited seating is not something to take personally." "Mom," I interrupted her. "Emma, my other sister, says even his cousin-in-law is invited, someone he hasn't even met before." Her response was enough to make me want to drive off of the Brooklyn Bridge. Well, you know how crazy inflation has gotten. Events like these aren't cheap. It was probably a tough call. You should be grateful that they felt confident enough to exclude you. My nails dug so hard into my skin, they formed those half-moon marks. "Be grateful?" I asked. "Mom, I'm the only one who even offered to pay for Dad's hospital bills. I was the only one by his bedside when he said his last words. But now I didn't make the cut to be there on a day meant to honor him. I knew you would do this. We all did," my mom said while sighing. I swear I almost threw my phone across the room. "Do what, exactly?" She then hung up the phone. My heart raced, and I practically tripped running down to the punching bag in my basement. If not for that, I would have caused even more serious harm. But when I was done, I didn't even want to confront my mom or Emma anymore. Emma would probably just text me, "Sorry." Meanwhile, my mom would tell me to come back when I'm ready to act properly. I'd be the one forced to accommodate them. But deep down, I knew that at least some of it was my fault, because that's the standard I set. I practically came out of the womb a people pleaser, and people said I'd always grow out of it, but I never did. Honestly, I never thought it would, until I got the text. It was from my mom, and clearly not meant to be sent to me. Jack, my name, just called. He doesn't know we rewrote the will. The message was deleted seconds later. That's when something in me cracked, because not only were they taking advantage of me, but also our dead father, and it was finally time for them to pay. I sat on my couch staring at the wall for nearly an hour. My phone kept buzzing with messages, probably my mom trying to cover her tracks. I didn't bother checking. The basement punching session had cleared my head enough to think straight. Dad had always told me I was too trusting. "Jack, people take kindness for weakness," he'd say. I never believed him until now. I opened my laptop and started making a list. Every time I'd covered for my sisters. Every time I'd paid bills they promised to split. Every holiday I spent with Dad while they were too busy. I needed ammunition. My sister Emma finally called around 9 p.m. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the best of me. "Jack, Mom said you're upset about tomorrow," she started, sounding annoyed rather than concerned. "What did they rewrite, Emma?" I asked calmly. The line went quiet. "What are you talking about?" "Mom's text. She accidentally sent it to me." "What did you guys rewrite?" More silence then. "It's not what you think. Dad asked us to make some adjustments before he passed. It was his idea." I laughed. Actually laughed. Dad was on an IV drip for his final 3 weeks. He couldn't even recognize me half the time. "Try again. Look, I can't talk about this right now. Just trust us, okay? We're family." I hung up. Family, right. The same family that couldn't be bothered to visit Dad more than twice during his 8-month battle with cancer. The same family that complained when I asked them to contribute to his medical expenses. I grabbed my car keys and headed out. I needed to see Morgan, Dad's attorney. We'd gotten friendly during Dad's illness, since I was the one handling all his paperwork. It was nearly 10 p.m., but I knew Morgan often worked late at his small practice downtown. The drive gave me time to cool off. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Dad really had requested changes. But why keep it from me? And why exclude me from the reading? None of it made sense. Morgan's office lights were off when I arrived, but I noticed his car in the parking lot. I called his cell. "Jack, everything okay?" He answered, sounding surprised. "Not really. Are you still at the office? I need to talk." 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from Morgan in his dimly lit office. He looked tired, tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. "What's going on?" "The reading's tomorrow," he said. "That's just it. I've been told I'm not invited due to limited seating." Morgan frowned. "That's unusual. Your father specifically wanted all his children present." My stomach tightened. "Did you help my family rewrite Dad's will recently?" His expression changed instantly. "Who told you that?" "So it's true?" Morgan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Jack, I can't discuss this with you. Attorney-client privilege. I'm his son, his primary caregiver for the last 2 years. I understand, but legally, did my father authorize these changes while he was lucid? I pressed. Morgan stood up. I think you should leave. We'll see you at the reading tomorrow. But I'm not invited, I reminded him. He looked genuinely confused. That's not possible. Your father's instructions were very clear. I showed him Vanessa's text. Morgan read it twice, then handed my phone back. This isn't right. The reading is scheduled in the main conference room. We could fit 20 people if needed. Now we were getting somewhere. So they lied about the seating. Morgan looked uncomfortable. Look, I can't get involved in family disputes, but I strongly suggest you attend tomorrow, 2 p.m. sharp. I thanked him and left, my mind racing. On the drive home, I called my other sister, Tara. She and I weren't close, but she'd always been the most straightforward of my siblings. She answered on the first ring. Jack, it's late. Did you know they're excluding me from Dad's will reading? Tara hesitated. Yeah, Mom mentioned something about space issues. It's a lie, Tara. I just spoke with Morgan. There's plenty of room. Another pause. Look, I don't know what's going on exactly, but Mom and Vanessa have been having a lot of private conversations lately. Something about making things more fair. More fair. Those words hit me like a truck. Dad had always been transparent about his intentions. The house would be sold and split equally. His savings would be divided among his 4 children. His collection of vintage watches would go to me, the only one who showed any interest in them. Some of them were quite valuable. They're trying to cut me out, aren't they? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I don't know details, Tara replied, but whatever's happening, it doesn't feel right. Dad would hate this. We talked a bit longer. Tara promised to text me if she learned anything else. After hanging up, I drove to Dad's house. Technically still Dad's until the estate was settled. I had keys since I'd been the one checking on the place. The house was dark and quiet, just as I'd left it last week after clearing out the perishables. I walked through the rooms, memories flooding back with each step. Dad teaching me to tie a tie in the bathroom mirror. Dad patiently explaining algebra at the kitchen table. Dad showing me how to change oil in the garage. In his study, I noticed something odd. The painting behind his desk, a landscape Mom had always hated, was slightly crooked. Dad was meticulous about that painting. I straightened it and felt something behind it. The small wall safe I'd forgotten about. Dad had shown it to me years ago, saying it contained important papers. I tried the combination, his birthday, but it didn't work. After several more attempts with family dates, I tried the date he received his first watch from his father. The safe clicked open. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written in Dad's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter inside was dated just 3 weeks before he died. Jack, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and something's happened. I've made copies of my final wishes with 3 different attorneys. Morgan has the official will. Trust no one else. You were always the only one I could count on. I'm sorry for whatever grief they're causing you now. Attached was a copy of his will, dated 5 months ago, and a list of account numbers and passwords. I sat at his desk, stunned. Dad had known this would happen. He'd prepared for it. I took photos of everything with my phone before carefully returning the documents to the safe. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'd be at that reading, invited or not, and I'd be ready for whatever my family had planned. I slept terribly that night. My dreams were a jumbled mess of Dad's disappointed face and Mom's cold voice. I woke up at 5 a.m., mind racing with plans for the will reading later that day. There was no way I was missing it, invitation or not. I made some coffee and reviewed the photos I'd taken of Dad's documents. The will seemed straightforward, exactly what he'd always told me. Equal split of the house proceeds and savings, with his watch collection specifically left to me. Some of those watches were worth thousands. I wondered if that's what this was all about. Around 7 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Hey, just checking you got my message about today? So sorry again about the space issue. I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? Actually, I know you're lying and trying to screw me over. Better to let them think I was sulking at home. I spent the morning researching estate law online. Not that I expected to become an expert in a few hours, but I wanted to understand what might happen if they really had changed Dad's will. Most sites said the same thing. Last-minute changes to wills, especially when someone was on heavy medication, could be contested. I took detailed notes, highlighting key phrases about testamentary capacity and undue influence that seemed particularly relevant to my situation. At noon, Tara called. They're all meeting for lunch before the reading, she whispered. Mom keeps asking if I've heard from you. What should I tell them? She asked. Nothing, I replied. Don't mention we've talked. Just act normal. She agreed and hung up quickly. I grabbed Dad's letter and a folder with copies of all his medical bills I'd paid, over $30,000 worth that my siblings had promised to help with when the estate was settled. I had a feeling that promise was about to evaporate. I arrived at Morgan's office building at 1:30, parking around the corner where my car wouldn't be spotted. The plan was simple. Walk in confidently, like I belonged there. If they tried to stop me, I'd deal with it then. I took a moment to straighten my tie and smooth down my shirt. Dad always said looking put together helped win half the battle in any confrontation. At 1:50, I entered the building and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Through the glass doors of Morgan's firm, I could see my family already gathered in the reception area. Mom, looking somber in black as if this were a funeral instead of a will reading. Vanessa, checking her watch nervously. Emma scrolling through her phone, looking bored. Tara standing slightly apart from the others, fidgeting with her purse strap. I took a deep breath and pushed through the doors. The receptionist looked up first. Good afternoon. Can I help you? Everyone turned. Mom's face went pale. Vanessa's mouth dropped open. Emma nearly dropped her phone. Jack! Tara exclaimed, sounding genuinely relieved. What are you doing here? Mom hissed, recovering quickly. I thought we discussed this. I smiled pleasantly. Hi everyone. I'm here for Dad's will reading. Vanessa stepped forward. But I texted you. There's limited seating. That's strange, I interrupted, because Morgan told me there's plenty of room in the conference room. He was quite surprised to hear I wasn't invited. Morgan chose that moment to emerge from his office. He paused, taking in the scene. Ah, Jack, good. You're here. We're ready to begin if everyone would follow me. Mom shot Vanessa a look that could have melted steel. They clearly hadn't expected Morgan to welcome me so easily. I followed the group into the large conference room, which, as Morgan had said, could easily fit 20 people. So much for limited seating. I sat directly across from Mom. She avoided my eyes, suddenly very interested in arranging her purse just so on the table. Cousin Rachel was there too, Dad's actual blood relative who'd always been kind to him, along with 2 people I didn't recognize, probably the lawyers who'd helped with the rewrite. Morgan cleared his throat. Before we begin, I need to confirm that everyone present is either named in the will or has legal standing to be here. He went around the table, noting each person's relationship to Dad. When he got to the 2 strangers, one introduced himself as Robert Davies, an attorney. And you are representing? Morgan asked. Mrs. Thompson, he replied, nodding toward my mother. Morgan frowned slightly but continued. When everyone was identified, he pulled out a thick document and placed it on the table. I have here the last will and testament of Thomas James Thompson, dated January 12th of this year. That date immediately caught my attention. Dad had been in relatively good health then, still able to make his own decisions clearly. The will I'd found in his safe was dated 5 months earlier. Morgan began reading. The standard legal language washed over me until he got to the distribution of assets. That's when everything changed. The family home and all its contents are to be left to my wife, Caroline Thompson, to dispose of as she sees fit. Wait, what? Dad had been clear the house would be sold and split among us kids. Mom already had her own condo downtown. My savings and investments are to be divided as follows. 30% to my daughter Vanessa, 30% to my daughter Emma, 30% to my daughter Tara, and 10% to my son Jack. I felt like I'd been punched. 10%? After everything I'd done? Furthermore, my collection of watches is to be sold, with proceeds added to the general estate for division as stated above. The watches. The one thing Dad had specifically promised to me. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to keep my composure. Morgan continued reading, but I barely heard him. I was staring at my mother, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. Vanessa, however, was watching me with what looked almost like pity. When Morgan finished, he asked if there were any questions. My hand shot up instantly. Yes, Jack? Morgan said, looking uncomfortable. I'd like to know when my father made these changes. The will I found in his safe is dated 5 months before this one. Robert Davies cut in. Mr. Thompson was perfectly lucid when he requested these amendments. I have reason to doubt that, I replied calmly. Furthermore, I continued, pulling out the envelope from Dad's safe, I have here a copy of my father's previous will, along with a letter stating that this was his true final wish. I slid the documents across to Morgan, who examined them with a deepening frown. Where did you get these? He asked. From Dad's safe, the one in his study. Mom's head snapped up. You broke into Thomas's safe? I used the combination he gave me years ago, the same way I've been accessing all his financial records to pay his medical bills for the past 2 years. Morgan was still examining the documents. This appears to be an authentic copy of the will I prepared last fall, and this letter, Robert Davies interrupted. Whatever that is, it doesn't invalidate the legal document we all just heard. The January will supersedes any previous versions. Not if Dad wasn't mentally competent when he signed it, I countered. Davies smiled coldly. Do you have proof he wasn't competent? I pulled out my phone. Actually, I do. I kept a daily log of Dad's medication and mental state for his doctors. I scrolled to February. On February 15th, Dad was hospitalized for complications. He physically couldn't have been signing anything that day. The room went quiet again. Morgan cleared his throat. This raises serious concerns about the validity of the January document. Mom finally spoke up. This is ridiculous. Thomas knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to make things fair. Fair? I couldn't help laughing. How is cutting me down to 10% fair? Because you've been living in his house rent-free for 2 years, Vanessa snapped. I moved in to take care of him, while the rest of you were too busy to visit more than once a month. Emma rolled her eyes. Here we go with the martyr routine. I pulled out the folder of medical bills. I paid over $30,000 of Dad's medical expenses out of my own pocket. You all promised to reimburse me when the estate was settled. I looked around the table. Was that part of making things fair too? Cutting me out so you wouldn't have to pay me back? Tara looked genuinely shocked. I didn't know about any of this. Mom said all the medical bills were covered by insurance. The meeting devolved from there. Morgan eventually called for a recess, asking everyone to return in 1 hour. As we filed out, Cousin Rachel caught my arm. Jack, your dad talked to me about those watches last Christmas. He was so excited to pass them on to you. Said you were the only one who appreciated their history. That nearly broke me. First, thanked her, and escaped to a coffee shop across the street, needing space to think. I was reviewing Dad's letter again, when Tara slid into the seat opposite me. I swear I didn't know, she said immediately. About the medical bills or the will changes? I believed her. Tara had always been straight with me, even when we disagreed. When did they start planning this? I asked. She sighed. About a month after Dad died. Mom and Vanessa were talking about how you'd taken advantage of the situation by living in his house. They thought you were getting too much. I was there because Dad needed full-time care. I gave up my apartment to move in with him. I know that now. Mom made it sound like you were just freeloading. We talked for the rest of the hour. Tara filled me in on conversations she'd overheard. How Mom and Vanessa had convinced Emma that I was somehow manipulating Dad for financial gain. How they'd found a lawyer willing to push through changes to the will during Dad's final days. They even practiced Dad's signature, she admitted quietly. I saw Vanessa doing it one night when she thought I was asleep. My blood ran cold. They forged his signature on the new will? Tara nodded. I think so. I didn't understand what was happening at the time. When we returned to Morgan's office, the atmosphere was tense. Morgan asked to speak privately with Mom and her attorney first. They were in his office for nearly 30 minutes. When they emerged, Mom looked furious. Morgan addressed the room. In light of new information, I'm postponing any distribution of assets pending further investigation. There appear to be significant questions about the January will's authenticity. Robert Davies objected loudly, but Morgan stood firm. Either we resolve this amicably, or this will move to probate court where everything becomes public record. That got everyone's attention. The last thing any of us wanted was our family drama playing out in court. Morgan continued. I suggest the family take some time to discuss a potential compromise based on Thomas's original will, the one from September that appears to reflect his true wishes. Mom grabbed her purse. This is outrageous. Come on, girls. She stormed out, with Vanessa and Emma following quickly behind. Tara hesitated, then gave me a small nod before joining them. I stayed behind to speak with Morgan. He looked exhausted. I'm sorry, Jack. I should have questioned these changes more thoroughly. Your father was my client for 20 years. I knew something wasn't right. What happens now? He sighed. Without a clear resolution, this could drag on for months in probate court. Your mother seems determined to fight. And if I can prove the signature was forged? Morgan's eyebrows shot up. That would be a criminal matter. Forging a will is fraud. I left Morgan's office feeling drained but determined. Dad had known this might happen. That's why he left the letter and copy of his real will in the safe. He was protecting me even after he was gone. Back at my apartment, I found 3 missed calls from Mom and a text from Emma calling me selfish for making a scene. I ignored both and called Tara instead. How bad is it there? I asked when she answered. Nuclear. Mom's talking about hiring a different lawyer. Vanessa keeps saying you tricked Dad into leaving you the watches because you knew their value. That's ridiculous. Dad offered them to each of you first. None of you wanted them. I remember, Tara said. Look, I've been thinking. I might have evidence that could help. My heart raced. What kind of evidence? Around the time they were planning all this, I lent Vanessa my iPad. When she returned it, she hadn't logged out of her email. I saw some messages between her and that lawyer, Davies. I took screenshots because it seemed shady, but I didn't understand what they were doing then. Do you still have those screenshots? Yes. And there's something else. The day they claimed Dad signed the new will, February 15th, I'm positive he was in the hospital. I visited him there. This confirmed what I'd found in my records. Can you send me everything you have? Yes, but Jack, be careful. Mom is really angry. I've never seen her like this. After hanging up, I went through Dad's medication logs again. Sure enough, on February 15th, Dad had been admitted to the hospital for complications. He physically couldn't have been at Morgan's office signing a new will. Tara's screenshots arrived an hour later. The emails were damning. Vanessa and Davies discussing how to modify the will without alerting Morgan. Davies suggesting they find a more agreeable attorney to witness the new document. Most shocking was an email where Vanessa explicitly mentioned practicing Dad's signature. I forwarded everything to Morgan with a brief explanation. His response came within minutes. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring Tara if she's willing. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about Dad's words. You were always the only one I could count on. He'd trusted me to handle this situation, to stand up for what was right. For once in my life, I wasn't going to back down and play peacemaker. The next morning, Tara met me outside Morgan's building. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Mom knows I'm helping you, she said as we walked in. She called me a traitor. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle. She shook her head. Don't be. What they did was wrong. Dad deserves better. Morgan was waiting with another attorney he introduced as Linda, a specialist in estate fraud. We spent 2 hours going through everything. The medication logs, hospital records confirming Dad's admission on February 15th, Tara's screenshots, and Dad's letter. This is more than enough to invalidate the January will, Linda concluded. The question is whether you want to pursue criminal charges for the forgery. I looked at Tara, who seemed uncomfortable with the idea of our sister facing criminal charges. Let's start by invalidating the fake will, I decided. I want Dad's real wishes honored. The rest can wait. Morgan nodded. I'll contact Caroline and her attorney today. Given the evidence, they would be wise to drop their claims immediately. We were just wrapping up when Morgan's receptionist buzzed. Mr. Thompson, your mother and sisters are here demanding to see you. Morgan raised his eyebrows. Do you want to speak with them now? I nodded. Might as well face this head on. They filed in looking like a united front. Mom leading, Vanessa and Emma flanking her. All 3 stopped short when they saw Tara sitting beside me. So this is where you disappeared to, Mom said coldly to Tara. Then to me, haven't you caused enough trouble? Your father would be ashamed of how you're tearing this family apart. That was rich. Coming from the woman who helped forge his will, I stayed calm. Morgan has evidence that the January will is fraudulent. Dad was in the hospital on February 15th and couldn't have signed it. Vanessa paled visibly. Emma looked confused. What are you talking about? Emma asked. Tell her, Vanessa, I said. Tell her how you practiced Dad's signature. How you and Mom plan to cut me out and keep the money I spent on Dad's care. That's not. We were just trying to make things fair, Vanessa stammered. Morgan intervened. Mrs. Thompson, we have clear evidence of fraud. The January document will not stand. You have two options: accept Thomas's original will as valid, or take this to court where all these details will become public record. Mom glared at me. You always were too sensitive, just like your father. Thank you, I replied simply. Dad had been the most decent person I knew. It was a compliment. After a tense silence, Mom finally nodded. Fine, use the original will, but don't expect this family to ever be the same. It hasn't been the same since you decided to dishonor Dad's wishes, I said quietly. They left without another word, Emma shooting confused glances between everyone. Only Vanessa looked back, her expression unreadable. Morgan assured us he would handle the paperwork to reinstate Dad's original will. As we left his office, Tara linked her arm through mine. Dad would be proud of you, she said, standing up for yourself finally. I'm not sure he'd be happy about the family being divided like this. She shook her head. The division was already there. You just refused to be the only one making sacrifices anymore. We walked to a nearby park and sat watching people go about their normal lives, untouched by our family drama. The autumn leaves were beginning to fall, creating a colorful carpet beneath our feet. I remembered how Dad used to take me to this same park when I was young, teaching me about the different trees and why their leaves changed colors. What happens now? Tara asked, breaking my reverie. I thought about Dad's watch collection waiting in his study, about the house that would now be sold and shared equally, about the relationships that might never heal. Now we honor Dad properly, I said, the way he deserved. Tara nodded. I'd like that. The next few weeks were difficult. Mom refused to speak to me, and Vanessa followed her lead. Emma was caught in the middle, occasionally texting to ask questions about what really happened. I answered honestly each time. The truth would come out eventually, and maybe some relationships could be salvaged. Morgan finalized the paperwork to invalidate the fraudulent will. Dad's original wishes would be honored. The house sold and proceeds split equally, his savings divided fairly among his children, and his beloved watch collection coming to me, just as he'd always intended. When the day came to clean out his study, I invited all my siblings. Only Tara showed up. Together, we carefully cataloged each timepiece, and she listened as I shared the stories Dad had told me about each one. The military watch his father had worn in World War II, the delicate dress watch he'd bought to celebrate his first promotion, the sturdy diving watch that had survived his sailing adventures in his younger days. He really did love these, didn't he? Tara said, handling each one with care. They weren't just things to him, I explained. They were memories, connections to the past. As the estate settlement progressed, I kept one promise to myself. I would not let bitterness consume me. Dad wouldn't have wanted that. He'd faced disappointments in his life too, but always managed to move forward with dignity. For the first time since Dad died, I felt like I could breathe again. The people pleaser in me had finally found a line he wouldn't cross. Dad had trusted me to do the right thing, and I had. The rest would sort itself out in time. The next few weeks were a weird mix of emotions. I felt relief that Dad's real will was being honored, but also this hollow ache knowing my family relationships were pretty much in shambles. Mom and Vanessa still weren't speaking to me. Emma was sending confused texts every few days. At least I had Tara in my corner. Morgan called with updates about once a week. The process was moving along without any more dramatic challenges. The house would be listed for sale soon, and Dad's accounts were being tallied for equal distribution. The watch collection officially became mine once the paperwork cleared. I spent a Saturday afternoon cleaning Dad's watches. Each one needed to be carefully wiped down, the mechanisms checked, and then stored properly in their cases. Dad had taught me how to maintain them years ago. It was strangely calming work that let my mind wander. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Can we talk? Like in person? That was unexpected. I texted back that she could come over tomorrow afternoon. I wasn't sure what she wanted, but at least she was reaching out. Maybe there was hope for saving at least one relationship. The next day, Emma arrived looking nervous. She'd never been to my apartment before, which said something about our relationship right there. Nice place, she said, glancing around as I led her to the living room. Thanks. Coffee? Sure. After getting her a cup, I sat across from her, waiting. Emma fiddled with her mug, not making eye contact. So, she finally said, I've been talking to Mom and Vanessa, and then to Tara. I'm getting completely different stories about what happened. I nodded. I bet. Mom says you manipulated Dad when he was sick. Vanessa says you're just greedy about the watches. Tara says they committed fraud. What do you think happened? I asked. She frowned. That's why I'm here. I want to hear your side directly. I told her everything. Finding Dad's letter, discovering the hospital records, Tara's screenshots of the emails. Emma listened without interrupting, her expression becoming increasingly troubled. They really forged his signature? She asked when I finished. According to Tara's evidence, yes. Emma put down her cup. Why would they do that? It's so extreme. I shrugged. Money changes people. Or maybe it just reveals who they already were. Did you really pay all those medical bills yourself? I grabbed the folder of receipts I'd kept and handed it to her. They promised to reimburse me when the estate settled. I'm guessing that's part of why they wanted to cut me out. Emma flipped through the papers, her eyes widening at the amounts. I had no idea. Mom said everything was covered by insurance. Insurance covered some, not all. She closed the folder, looking genuinely upset. Jack, I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions. It wasn't quite an apology for her part in everything, but it was something. We talked for another hour. Emma admitted she'd been mostly going along with Mom and Vanessa because it was easier. She hadn't actually understood what they were doing. I believed her. Emma had always been the follower of the family. After she left, I felt slightly better. One small bridge maybe on the path to repair, but I wasn't holding my breath for similar breakthroughs with Mom or Vanessa. The next week, Morgan called with news that the house had been listed for sale. We needed to clear out the remaining personal items soon. I dreaded the thought of running into Mom or Vanessa there, but it had to be done. I decided to go on a Tuesday morning when everyone would likely be at work. The house felt eerily quiet when I let myself in. So many memories in these walls. I headed straight for Dad's bedroom to pack up his clothes for donation. I was halfway through the closet when I heard the front door open. My whole body tensed, waiting to see who it was. "Hello?" Tara's voice echoed from downstairs. I relaxed immediately. "Up here!" She appeared in the doorway a moment later. "Thought you might be here. Emma mentioned you were starting to clear things out." "Yeah, the realtor wants to stage the place soon. Did you come to help?" She nodded. "And to grab some photo albums if that's okay." We worked side by side, sorting through Dad's possessions. It was easier with Tara there, turning the sad task into something almost pleasant, as we shared memories about the items we found. In his nightstand drawer, I discovered a small jewelry box I'd never seen before. Inside was a tie pin I recognized immediately. It had belonged to Grandpa, Dad's father. There was a note tucked into the lid, "For Jack, a man who understands the value of family." My throat tightened. Dad had left little surprises like this throughout the house, I realized. Things he wanted specific people to have that weren't valuable enough to list in the will. "You okay?" Tara asked, noticing my expression. I showed her the tie pin and note. He knew. Even before he got sick, he was planning who would get what. Tara smiled. That was Dad, always thinking ahead. We spent the rest of the day discovering more of these hidden treasures. A cookbook with notes for Emma, a small watercolor painting Dad had bought on a trip to Maine that had Tara's name on the back, even items for Vanessa and Mom. "Should we tell them?" I asked Tara as we cataloged everything. She hesitated. "Let me talk to Emma first. Maybe we can all come together to go through these things. It might help heal some wounds." I wasn't convinced Mom or Vanessa would be interested in healing, but I agreed. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about honoring Dad. 3 days later, I got a surprising text from Vanessa. "Emma said there are things Dad left specifically for us. Is that true?" I confirmed it was, adding that I'd set everything aside in labeled boxes. She didn't respond immediately. When she finally did, it was just, "When can I come see?" We arranged for all 4 siblings to meet at the house that weekend. I deliberately didn't invite Mom. That bridge seemed too damaged to repair right now. I arrived early to make sure everything was organized, feeling strangely nervous about seeing Vanessa. Emma arrived first, then Tara. We chatted awkwardly in the kitchen, avoiding any mention of the will situation. When Vanessa finally showed up, 20 minutes late, the tension in the room doubled. "Hi," she said stiffly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Thanks for coming," I replied. "The boxes are in the living room." We moved to the living room where I'd organized everything. 4 boxes labeled with our names, plus one for Mom that I'd set aside. I explained how Tara and I had found Dad's hidden gifts throughout the house. "He must have been planning this for years," I said. "Some of the notes are dated from before he got sick." Vanessa picked up her box first, opening it cautiously, as if expecting a trick. Inside was a leather-bound journal, Dad's travel diary from the year he backpacked through Europe after college. Vanessa had always talked about wanting to travel the same route someday. "He remembered," she whispered, running her fingers over the worn cover. Emma found a first edition of her favorite childhood book, with a note saying it had taken him years to track down. Tara discovered more than just the painting. There was also a small wooden box containing seashells they'd collected together at the beach when she was little. My box contained several items beyond the tie pin, a pocket compass Dad had carried when he taught me to hike, his favorite fountain pen, and a handwritten list of all the life advice he'd tried to pass on to me over the years. We sat there silently, each absorbed in our own discoveries. Then Vanessa did something that shocked me. She started to cry. "I'm sorry," she managed between sobs. "I'm so sorry, Jack." I froze, completely unprepared for this. Emma and Tara looked equally surprised. "Dad would be so disappointed in me," Vanessa continued. Mom was so upset about how much time you spent with him at the end. She kept saying you were manipulating him." I believed her because it was easier than admitting we'd abandoned him. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to make her grovel for forgiveness. But looking around at the evidence of Dad's careful planning, his desire for us to remain a family even after he was gone, I couldn't hold on to that anger. He knew who was really there for him, I said quietly. "That's why he left that letter in the safe." Vanessa nodded miserably. "Mom still doesn't get it. She thinks you tricked him somehow." "I know. That's her choice." We spent the next few hours going through more of Dad's things together, deciding as a group what to keep, what to donate, what to sell with the house. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old resentments bubbling up, but it was progress. By the end of the day, something had shifted. We ordered pizza and sat in the kitchen eating off paper plates, just like we used to when Dad would declare kitchen picnic night during our childhood. "What about Mom's box?" Emma asked, gesturing to the 5th box I'd set aside. "I'll give it to her," Vanessa offered. "Maybe it will help her come around." I didn't have much hope for that, but I appreciated the gesture. The house sold quickly, going to a young family with 2 kids who loved the big backyard. Our equal shares of the proceeds were deposited directly to our accounts. The rest of Dad's assets were divided exactly as his original will specified. Mom never did come around. She refused her box of Dad's mementos at first, though Emma told me she eventually took it. We settled into a cold peace, exchanging stilted greetings at Emma's birthday dinner, but nothing more. I had accepted that some relationships couldn't be fixed. A month after everything was settled, I hosted a small dinner at my apartment. Just me, Tara, and Emma. Vanessa had been invited but cancelled last minute, falling back into old patterns. Still, it was more family than I'd had around my table in years. I brought out Dad's favorite watches to show them, explaining the history of each piece. They actually seemed interested, asking questions and handling them carefully. "What will you do with them?" Emma asked. "Some of these must be worth a lot. Keep them. Pass them down someday." I smiled, thinking of Dad's meticulous care for each timepiece. "They're not just about the money. They're part of his legacy." Tara raised her glass. "To Dad. To Dad," Emma and I echoed. Later that night, after they'd gone, I sat looking at the tie pin Dad had left me. "A man who understands the value of family," his note had said. I hadn't fully understood what he meant until now. Family wasn't just about blood or legal documents or who got what inheritance. It was about who showed up when it mattered, who fought for what was right, even when it was hard. Dad had known that all along. I placed the tie pin carefully back in its box. Tomorrow, I'd wear it to my new job interview. It felt right to carry a piece of Dad with me as I moved forward. He'd taught me to stand up for myself, finally. It was the most valuable inheritance he could have left.